In a quiet corner of the galaxy floated trade station Ellery 5. It wasn't a fancy place. It was old, rusty, and filled with aliens from many different worlds. Ships came in, ships left, and business never stopped. One alien worked deep inside the docking bays. Her name was Carol. She was a Volari, a tall reptilian species with smooth green scales and bright yellow eyes. Volari were known for their sharp minds and strong claws. They loved beauty, bright colors, shining metals, fancy clothes. But Carl didn't have any of that. She wore plain gray overalls and simple boots. Her scales were dull. Her claws were chipped from years of working with machines. Other Volari whispered behind her back. "She's so plain," they said. "No style, no color." Carl never said anything back. She kept her head down and focused on her job. She was a mechanic. And a good one. Every day she fixed broken engines, leaky fuel tanks, and shattered wings. She worked harder than anyone else in Dock Bay 17. Ships left her hands faster, stronger, and safer. But no one thanked her. No one saw her until one strange ship arrived. It was a small, beaten-up vessel with human markings. The engines were smoking, the wings were cracked, the landing gear was half broken. When the ship touched down, station guards rushed in, weapons ready. No one trusted humans not since the last galactic war. But the human inside was not a soldier. He was just a pilot. His name was Jack Morgan, and he was unconscious from blood loss. Medics carried him out. "He'll live," they said. "But he needs rest." No one wanted to touch his ship. Human tech was strange, full of odd wires, metal parts, and strange humming sounds. "Let it sit there," a technician said. "We'll scrap it later." Carl stood quietly nearby. She watched the ship. It looked damaged, yes, but not beyond repair. Something about it called to her. "I'll fix it," she said. The other workers laughed. "You? That human junk? Good luck." Carl didn't care. She got her tools and walked toward the ship. Inside the hangar, the ship was a mess. Wires hung from the walls. Lights flickered. The smell of burned plastic filled the air. But Carol smiled. Machines didn't judge her. Machines didn't call her plain. Machines only cared if you listened. She started with the engines, then the shields, then the control systems. Every day she worked, hands steady, mind sharp. After 4 days, the human woke up. Jack Morgan was surprised to be alive. He was more surprised to see a Vellery working on his ship. "You're fixing it?" he asked, voice weak. Carl nodded. "Yes, you were in a fight, pirates," he said. "They chased me through a wormhole. Ship took most of the hits." Carl didn't ask more. She just kept working. Jack watched her. She moved with care, like the ship was alive. He'd seen many mechanics, even on Earth, but none like her. "You're good," he said. Carl looked at him but didn't answer. She wasn't used to compliments. Over the next few days, Jack got stronger. He sat beside the ship while Carol worked. They began to talk. Jack told her about Earth, about oceans, blue skies, trees that changed color in autumn. Carol listened quietly. She had never seen trees or oceans. Her world, Volara, was rocky and dry. She had lived on the space station for 10 years now. "Don't you ever leave?" Jack asked. Carl shook her head. "No one invites me." Jack laughed. "You don't need an invitation. Just go." Carl looked down. "Not me. Why not?" She didn't answer. Jack thought for a moment. Then he said, "You know, you're different from the others." Carol blinked. "Because I fix ships?" "No," Jack said. "Because you care about them. I can see it." Carl felt something strange in her chest. Warm, soft. It had been a long time since someone saw her like that. Later that day, as she crawled under the ship's main engine, Jack sat nearby, fixing a small control panel. He glanced at her. "You know something?" He said, "You're beautiful." Carol stopped moving. The wrench in her hand dropped with a loud clang. She slowly pulled herself out from under the ship and stared at him. "What did you say?" Jack smiled. "I said you're beautiful." Carl's mouth opened slightly. Her eyes widened. For a full 10 seconds, she didn't speak. No one, not her family, not her teachers, not her coworkers, had ever said those words to her. She thought he was joking. But Jack's face was calm, honest. "You're serious," she whispered. "Of course," he said. "Why wouldn't I be?" Carl looked away. She didn't know what to say. Her hands trembled slightly. She stood up and walked toward her toolkit, pretending to sort tools. Her heart beat fast. Her mind was full of questions. Why would a human call her that? What did he see that others didn't? Behind her, Jack went back to work, whistling softly. Carol touched her face. For the first time in her life, she felt something she had never felt before. Hope. And in that moment, something inside her began to change. Carl didn't sleep that night. She sat alone in her small room above Dock Bay 17, staring at the wall. Jack's words kept echoing in her head. "You're beautiful." No one had ever said those words to her before. Not in all her years on the station. Not on Valara. Not anywhere. She looked into the small metal mirror above her sink. Her green scales looked the same. Her face looked the same. But something inside felt different. Was he lying? Was he just being kind? The next morning, Carl went to work. Earlier than usual, she wanted to focus, to forget the feeling, but her hands trembled slightly. Jack was already sitting by the ship, drinking something hot from a silver cup. "Morning," he said cheerfully. Carl nodded. She grabbed her toolbox and started working without a word. She was quieter than usual, Jack noticed. "Did I say something wrong yesterday?" he asked gently. Carl didn't look at him. No, just surprised. He leaned against the wall, watching her carefully fix a damaged stabilizer coil. "I meant it, he said. "You really are beautiful." Carl sighed. "To you, maybe. Not to my people." Jack frowned. "What do they think beauty means?" Carl wiped grease off her claws. Shiny scales, jewelry, color, loud voices, attention. "I don't. Have any of those things?" Jack smiled. "On Earth we have a saying. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. That means everyone sees beauty in different ways." Carol paused. "And how do humans see it?" Jack looked at her for a long moment. "We see beauty in strength, in kindness, in skill, someone who never gives up." Like you, Carol didn't speak, but something inside her chest softened. From that day on, Jack and Carol worked side by side. The ship's systems were damaged in ways that took days to fix. Every day brought new repairs and new conversations. Jack told her stories about Earth, big blue oceans where waves crashed against soft sand, forests full of tall trees and animals, cities with buildings that touched the clouds. People danced in the streets. Music played everywhere. Carl listened like a child hearing fairy tales. Her home world had been full of rocks, heat, and silence. "You should come to Earth one day," Jack said once. Carol chuckled. "I would not fit in." "Why not?" "I am not human." "Plain." Jack shook his head. "Don't say that. You'd fit in just fine." Their bond grew. Stronger with every passing hour, they shared food. Shared stories. Laughed at broken parts and cursed leaky pipes. Other workers in the hangar noticed, but said nothing, though some began to whisper. One day, as Carl walked past to fellow Valari, she heard their words. "She's acting strange," one said, smiling more, "spending too much time." "With that human," said the other. "He must be lying to her." Carl kept walking, but her tail twitched. She felt something burning inside, not shame, but anger. Why did it matter to them? Why did they care if a human thought she was beautiful? Night, in her room, Carl pulled out a small metal sheet and polished it. She looked into it and saw her own face. She saw the tired eyes, the small scars on her chin, the grease on her cheeks. But she also saw something else. She saw strength. She saw years of hard work. She saw a mechanic who never gave up. She touched her face gently. Maybe Jack was right. The next morning, Carl did something unusual. She cleaned her overalls. She brushed her claws. She tied her tool belt neatly. It wasn't much, but for her, it was a change. When she walked into Dock Bay 17, Jack noticed right away. "You look different," he said. Carl tilted her head. "Worse." Jack shook his head. "No, just brighter." Carl looked away, but her mouth curved into a tiny smile. They worked together in silence for a while. And Jack said, "You know, you could be a ship captain one day." Carol laughed. "Me? No. I fix ships. I don't fly them. But you understand ships better than most pilots. You know what keeps them together?" Carl thought about that. It was true. She had rebuilt dozens of ships over the years. Maybe she could learn to fly one. Jack leaned closer. "You have more power than you think, Carol." She stared at him, unsure what to say. No one had ever believed in her dreams. No one had ever told her she could be more. "Why do you say these things?" she whispered. Jack shrugged. "They're true." Carl picked up a tool and returned to the engine. But her heart was no longer quiet. Later that evening, as Carl walked back to her room, she passed by a group of aliens. Some were Valari. Some were from other species. They were whispering again, this time louder. "The human is strange," one said. "He must be playing with her. Maybe she's just desperate," another laughed. Carl stopped. She turned around and looked at them. Her voice was calm but strong. "I am not desperate. I am not a toy. And I am not plain." The group went silent, shocked. No one expected her to speak. Carl walked away, head high, back in her room. She stood in front of the mirror again. She no longer saw just a mechanic. She saw something more. A spark had been lit, and it was only the beginning. The next few days on Trade Station LRE 5 were different. Carl still worked in Dock Bay 17. But now, more eyes watched her. She heard the whispers, not just from Valari workers, but from aliens of all kinds. "Did you hear?" he said. "That plane mechanic, the human, called her beautiful. Is it true? A human said that? I don't believe it. Must be a joke." Some laughed. Others looked confused. A few looked jealous. No one had ever noticed Carl before. Now, her name was in every corner of the station. Carl tried to ignore it. She kept her head down and worked as always. But inside, she felt something new. Pride. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel invisible. Jack noticed the change. "You're walking taller," said one morning, handing her a spanner. "That's good." Carl gave a small smile. "Maybe it's your fault." "My fault?" "You've said something I never heard before," Jack chuckled. "Then I'm glad I said it." That day, Carl walked into the supply depot to get new parts. The room was full of other workers. As she entered, a group of Velaries stared at her, then laughed quietly. One of them, Torvik, a tall male with shiny blue scales and gold rings on his horns, stepped forward. "Well, if it isn't our station's new beauty queen," he said loudly. Others laughed. Carl didn't react. She walked past him and picked up the parts she needed. "Tell me," Torvik continued, "how did you fool a human into saying that? Did you use some mind trick?" Carol turned around. Her voice was calm. "Maybe he sees something you don't." Torvik's eyes narrowed. "You think you're better than us now?" "No. I just think different eyes see different truths." With that, she left the depot, holding her head high. Later, Carol told Jack about the conversation. He listened quietly, then said, "Want me to say something to them?" Carol shook her head. "No, they're not worth it." But Jack could see something in her eyes, small pain hiding behind strength. That night, Jack sat alone by his ship and thought about Carol. She had lived her whole life in silence, doing hard work, being ignored, laughed at, and yet she never became bitter. She never gave up. He respected that, and he wanted others to see it too. The next morning, Jack did something unusual. He walked into the central mess hall, the busiest place on the station. Hundreds of workers gathered there daily. He stood on a table and spoke loudly. "Everyone, can I have your attention for a minute?" Voices quieted, heads turned. "A human standing on a table was not something you saw every day," Jack continued. "I've been here for a while now, and I want to thank someone." He pointed toward Carl, who had just entered the room. "That mechanic Krause. saved my ship and probably my life. She worked day and night, never asked for thanks, never looked for praise. And she's the best engineer I've ever met. Oh. A few people clapped. Politely. Others looked confused, Jack added. Also, I called her beautiful, and I meant it. If you can't see that, maybe you need better eyes. With that, he stepped down and walked away. Carl stood frozen at the doorway. Everyone was looking at her now. Some looked surprised, others curious. A few nodded. Carl didn't know what to say. But inside her, something warm began to bloom. Later that evening, she found Jack near his ship. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, Jack replied, but I wanted to. Carl sat beside him on a metal box. For a while, they sat in silence. Then she asked, Why do you care what others think of me? Jack looked at her. Because I've seen people like you before, not Valari, but people who are always in the background, quiet, overlooked, but strong, important. He smiled. You matter, Carol. People should see that. She looked down at her claws. It's strange. All my life I believed I was just plain. You're not, he said softly. Carol nodded. I'm starting to believe that. The next few days were peaceful. Carl kept working, but now more aliens came to her for help. Some asked for advice. Some brought her food. One even asked if she could train their apprentice. Something had changed. She still heard whispers. But now, some were kind. She fixed my ship in half the time. She's smarter than most tech teams. She's not plain. She's powerful. Carol began to feel something new confidence. She no longer hid in shadows. She laughed. More. She even added a small silver charm to her tool belt, a gift from Jack. When Jack saw it, he smiled. That looks good on you. Just a little color, she said with a small laugh. But peace never lasted long on a trade station. One night, Jack walked back from the mess hall. He was stopped in a dark corridor by Torvik and two other Valari. Well, human Torvik said coldly. Still think our Carol is beautiful? Jack didn't move. Yes, I do, Torvik sneered. Maybe you need your eyes checked. The other Valari stepped forward, claws out. Jack stood tall, but he was outnumbered. Just then, Carl appeared at the end of the corridor. She didn't run. She didn't shout. She simply walked up and stood between Jack and the others. Her voice was like steel. You will not touch him. Torvik laughed. You'll stop us. Carol raised her wrench slowly. Yes, I will. Torvik stared at her. Something in her eyes made him pause. After a long moment, he scoffed and turned away. Not worth it. Ah! The others followed him. Carl turned to Jack. Are you hurt? Jack shook his head. No, but you didn't have to do that. Carol smiled. You did it for me. Now it was my turn. Jack looked at her full of respect. You're not plain, Carol. You're brilliant. And in that moment, she finally believed it too. Carl stood quietly in Dock Bay 17, watching the ship's main engines power up. The repairs were nearly complete. Just one more day and Jack Morgan's ship would be ready to fly again. But for Carl, something had already changed. She wasn't the same mechanic who had lived in silence and shadows. She had found her voice. She had defended someone. Someone had defended her. Now, she felt like a part of something more, something beyond fixing machines. As she tightened a fuel line, she heard footsteps. She turned and saw Jack walking. In with 2 small bags? Lunch, he said with a smile. Carl took a break and sat with him on a crate. He handed her a wrapped meal. I got this from the human food stall, he said. Not spicy. Carl took a bite and nodded. Tastes strange, but good. They ate in silence for a while. Then Jack spoke. My ship's almost ready. I'll leave soon. Carl looked down. Yes, but... Jack paused. I want you to come with me. Carl froze. What? Come with me, Jack said again. Be part of my crew. I need someone who knows ships better than... I do. Carl stared at him. She had never left the station, never traveled beyond this rusted shell of metal. Could she really go? I don't know, she whispered. I've never been anywhere. Jack leaned closer. You can, and you should. You've spent your whole life being ignored. Out there, you'll be seen. Carl looked at her hands. They were covered in grease, with small burns and old cuts. Strong hands, capable hands. She wanted to say yes. She really did, but her thoughts were interrupted by a voice. Well, look who's playing captain now. Torvik had entered the bay, arms crossed, eyes full of dislike. Carl stood up slowly. What do you want, Torvik? Ignored her and looked at Jack. So the human is taking you away? Did he promise you the stars? Carl didn't answer. Torvik laughed. You think he really cares? You're just a tool to him. Mechanic to fix his broken ship. Jack stood. His voice was calm. Don't talk to her like that. Torvik stepped closer. Stay out of this, human. Carl stepped between them again. Enough. Her voice echoed across the hangar. Strong, clear. Torvik blinked in surprise. I am not yours to mock. Not anymore, she said. You don't decide who I am. Doe. Torvik sneered. You're making a mistake. He'll leave you. Carl looked at Jack, then back at Torvik. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. But I won't live in fear anymore. Torvik didn't know what to say. After a long moment, he turned and left. Without another word, that evening, Carl walked alone through the station's garden dome. It wasn't large, just a small place where green plants grew under artificial light. She liked to come here when her thoughts were heavy. She sat on a bench and stared at the soft leaves. Could she really leave? She had lived her whole life in this station. She knew every pipe, every hallway. She had no family left. No true friends except Jack. The stars scared her. They also called to her. She heard footsteps behind her. Jack sat beside her. I didn't mean to pressure you, he said softly. Carol shook her head. You didn't, I'm just thinking. Jack looked up at the dome. Up there the galaxy is full of places you've never seen. Oceans, skies, storms on gas giants. You'd love it. Do you always say such things to strange aliens? Jack laughed. Only to the ones I admire. She looked at him. Why me? He leaned back. Because you're strong. You never gave up, even when people tried to push you down. You have a good heart. Carl was silent for a while. Then she said, I'm afraid. Jack nodded. It's okay to be afraid. But don't let fear decide your life. She turned her head and looked at him. Okay. Carol nodded again. I'll come with you. The next day, Carol packed her few things. Tools, a photo of her parents, a data chip full of repair logs. She wore a clean uniform Jack gave her, simple, dark blue, with a small patch that read engineer. As they walked to the ship, workers stared. Some whispered, some smiled. A few even clapped. She had gone from being the plane mechanic to someone respected. Jack opened the ship's ramp. Welcome aboard, Engineer Carol. She stepped inside. The ship wasn't big, but it was home. Her new home. She walked to the engine room. Everything was where she had placed it. She touched the control panel and smiled. She was ready. Just before takeoff, a message came from Dock Command. Unauthorized launch detected. Stop your engines. Carl and Jack looked at each other. Jack tapped the com. This is Ship Firebird. Cleared for departure. Your passenger is not cleared, the voice replied. Carl stepped forward. This is Carl. I've worked here for 10 years. I choose to leave. You were not approved for off-station travel. Jack frowned. She's a free citizen. A new voice came on, an older Valari from Station Command. Let her go, the voice said. She has earned it. The engines roared to life as the ship lifted off. Carl looked out the window. The station grew smaller behind her. Ahead was the galaxy wide. Open, full of stars, Jack sat beside her in the cockpit, nervous. Asked a little, Carl said. He smiled. Don't worry, you're not alone. Carl looked ahead. Her eyes were steady. She wasn't plain anymore. She was a traveler now, and this was just the beginning. The human ship Firebird flew quietly through space, its engines humming like a soft song. Inside, Carl sat at her new workstation in the engine room. It had only been 3 days since she left trade station Ilari 5, but her life already felt completely different. She was no longer the plain mechanic who hid in the shadows. Now, she was part of a crew, part of a journey. And every star outside the window reminded her of how far she had come. Jack walked into the engine room with 2 cups of hot drink. He handed one to Carl. "Still keeping everything running perfectly?" he asked with a smile. Carl nodded. "The fuel flow is smooth. The shields are strong. You won't crash again." Jack laughed. "Good. I like not crashing." They stood together for a moment, sipping their drinks. The sound of space filled the silent, soft beeps, light vibrations, and the distant hum of the ship. Carol turned. To him, "Where are we going next?" Jack smiled. "A place called Solara Station. It orbits a warm planet with golden clouds. You'll like it." "What's special about it?" she asked. "There's a large market, many species, and a garden. Dome 3 times the size of Alaris. Real trees. Real birds." Carol's eyes widened slightly. "I want to see that." "You will," Jack said. "You're the engineer now. Go where the ship goes." As they flew, Carol began learning more human customs. Jack showed her old Earth. Movies taught her about Earth animals, and even played music from different countries. One day, Carl tried painting for the first time using a small kit Jack gave her. She painted a simple starship flying through blue clouds. "It's not very good," she said, showing it to Jack. He looked at it carefully. "It's honest. That's what makes it good." Carl stared at the small painting. No one had ever asked her to create anything before. No one had ever encouraged her to do more than fix machines. Now, she was learning that she could be more. On the 4th day of travel, a distress signal appeared on the ship's console. Jack tapped the controls. An identified ship nearby. Damaged. No life signs, but the beacons still active. Carl walked into the cockpit. "Should we check it?" Jack nodded. "It's a good habit. Sometimes survivors don't show on scanners." As they approached the ship, they saw it drifting slowly, one engine flickering. The outer hull was cracked, and parts floated nearby. Jack brought Firebird close and docked carefully. "Stay here," he said to Carol. Carol frowned. "I can help." Jack paused, then nodded. "All right, but stay behind me." They both suited up and entered the broken ship. The inside was dark and cold. Emergency lights blinked red. Wires hung from the walls. Carl moved silently, scanning the systems while Jack checked for survivors. In one room, Carl found a small alien child, unconscious but breathing. "Jack," she called. They rushed the child back to Firebird and placed her in the med pod. "She's stable," Jack said after checking the monitor. "She just needs rest." Carl stood beside the pod. The child was small, with soft gray skin and 4 fingers on each hand. "Who left her behind?" she whispered. Jack shook his head. "Some crews panicked during an attack. Or maybe something worse." Carl felt her claws curl. She was alone. "Not anymore," Jack said. "We'll take her to Solara. There's a care center there." That night, Carl sat beside the med pod. She watched the child sleep peacefully. She remembered how alone she had felt before, how no one saw her, how no one cared. She leaned closer and whispered, "You're not plain. You're not forgotten. You're strong." The child didn't hear. But Carl felt something inside her shift. She was no longer just trying to prove herself. Now, she wanted to help others see their worth too. The next day, they arrived at Solara Station. It was a beautiful place. Large rings of light circled. The main structure, long windows, showed bright green gardens inside. Carl stood by the window in wonder. "So much color," she whispered. Jack smiled. "Told you you'd like it?" brought the child to the care center. The staff promised to find her family or give her a safe home. Before leaving, Carol placed her painted starship beside the child's bed, something to look at. She said quietly. Back on the Firebird, Carol felt full of emotion. She had done something meaningful, something bigger than fixing an engine. Jack noticed her quiet mood. You okay? He asked. Carol nodded. I helped someone. Yes, Jack said. You saved her. Carol looked at him. Feels good, Jack smiled. That's what purpose feels like. That night, they walked through the garden dome. Real grass grew beneath their boots. Tall trees reached up to the glass roof. Birds flew between branches. Carl had never seen anything like it. She touched a tree gently. So much life. Earth has forests like this, Jack said. Some even bigger. See them, she said. You will, Jack replied. We'll go there one day. They sat by a small pond. Water rippled gently. Carl looked up at the stars. I used to think I didn't belong anywhere, she said. Jack looked at her. And now, Carl turned to him. Now I know I can belong anywhere I choose. Jack nodded slowly. You've changed. Carl smiled. I've grown. He looked at her. Not as a mechanic, not as a crew member, but as someone strong, kind, and brave. You're still beautiful. He said. Carl didn't freeze this time. She smiled fully, her eyes soft. I believe you now. The Firebird floated peacefully above Solaris Station. The ship had been cleaned, repaired, and fully stocked again. A gentle light from the nearby star shone across its silver hull. Inside, Carl sat in the cockpit watching the stars slowly drift past. Her reflection stared back from the glass soft green eyes, short dark hair, sharp lines on her cheeks. She had always thought of herself as forgettable. But now, when she looked at her reflection, she saw something different. She saw strength. She saw someone who had saved a child, helped a human crew, and found her own place in the stars. And she wasn't playing anymore, and not to herself, and not to Jack. Jack entered the cockpit, holding a small box. Morning, he said. Or whatever time it is. Carl looked at him and smiled. Good orbit time. Jack chuckled. That works. He handed her the box. What is it? She asked. Open it. She did and found a metal badge shaped like a flame with tiny stars carved inside. At the center, a name was written. Carl Vaughn, Chief Engineer, Firebird. She stared at it for a moment. This is mine. Jack nodded. You earned it. You're not a helper. You're part of this crew. And this ship wouldn't run without you. Carl held the badge close. Her hands trembled just a little. I never thought I'd have something like this. Jack smiled. You deserve it. She looked at him and said softly, Thank you. A few hours later, Jack called her to the command room. We've got a mission, he said. A message came in. There's a power relay station deep in the asteroid belt. It's failing. If it goes down, a whole section of stations will go dark. Carl checked the data. Heavy radiation zone. Not many ships go there. That's why they asked us? Carl gave a small nod. We can do it, Jack smiled. That's the spirit. The Firebird entered the asteroid belt carefully. Thousands of rocks floated like frozen waves in the black sea of space. The damaged relay station blinked weakly between two large spinning boulders. Carl put on her helmet. I'll go out and fix it. Jack raised an eyebrow. I should go with you. Carell looked calm. You trust me, right? Jack nodded slowly. Yes, I do. Then let me do this. She stepped into the airlock, clipped her tools to her belt, and launched out into space. Carl floated toward the broken station. The radiation levels were rising, but she moved fast and carefully. Her hands worked like a dance opening panels, rewiring damaged circuits, replacing shattered coils. Back on the ship, Jack watched her vitals. You're doing great, he said over the comms. Carl smiled under her helmet. This isn't so hard. I fixed worse on Ellery. Suddenly, a small asteroid hit the station's side, knocking her slightly off balance. Jack's voice came. Fast. Carl, are you okay? I'm fine, she said, gripping the station. Just a small bump. But the damage was worse than she thought. One of the new cables had torn. She checked her tools. I don't have a spare, Jack responded. Get back. We'll figure something out. Carl looked at the glowing systems. If she left now, they'd lose the whole grid. She made a quick decision. I'll reroute the power manually, she said. That's dangerous, Jack replied. Carl took a deep breath. But it will work. She reached into the core panel and made fast changes. Sparks flew, heat rose, and her suit alarms beeped, but after 10 long seconds, the station's lights came back on. Jack shouted over the comms, You did it. Carl laughed softly, floating back toward the Firebird. Told you I could. Later, in the med bay, Carol sat quietly while Jack checked her pulse and oxygen levels. You took a risk, he said. Carol nodded. But it was worth it. Jack looked at her carefully. You're not afraid anymore, are you? Carl thought for a moment. I was never afraid of machines. I was afraid of being seen. And not liked. Not accepted. And now? He asked. She smiled. Now I don't need to hide. Jack leaned forward. I see you, Carol. All of you. And I like what I see. She didn't freeze this time. She leaned closer, too. You showed me that I mattered. Jack shrugged lightly. Sometimes people just need someone to believe in them. Carl looked into his eyes. You believed in me before I did. As the Firebird left the asteroid belt, Carl stood in the engine room again, her hand resting on the smooth wall of the core. I used to think this was the only thing I could understand, she said quietly. Now she understood more. She understood. Courage, kindness, trust, something new, something warm in her chest. Maybe it was love, maybe it was hope, or maybe it was simply knowing she finally belonged. On the viewing deck, Jack and Carol sat side by side, watching the stars together. Heard there's a nebula up ahead, Jack said. Bright colors. Good place to stop and rest. Carl smiled. Let's go. He looked at her. Carl. Yes, you're still beautiful. This time, she didn't smile politely. This time, she laughed a soft, happy laugh that echoed in the silence of space, and then she looked at him and said clearly, And I believe you.